Good evening, everybody. It has been quite some time since I've been able to say that, so I'm very happy to be back. And we're going to be doing a bit more Outlast tonight. I'll maybe explain why in a little bit, but first wanted to take a minute to say thank you for stopping by tonight. I know that it has been quite a bit of time since I did the last stream, and that is just because of grad school and all of the work that it entails. Obviously, there is a holiday, at least for Canada, tomorrow. Although, for those of you who are interested in China, it is Singles Day. But with that in mind, I thought I would take the opportunity to get a quick stream in. I'd still have quite a bit of homework, and I'm really trying to figure out a way of resolving my priorities of keeping the stream going, especially with all of the support that you guys have given me, but also remaining accountable to the school schedule and sort of this career path or intellectual endeavor that I've taken on. And I will admit that it actually hasn't been balanced that well on either side. Clearly, I've not been able to do as many streams as I would like to begin with. And then in terms of school, I could be doing quite a bit better in it than, at least I think I could be doing quite a bit better in it than I actually am. So, with that in mind, we'll still work out sort of the best way to balance those two priorities. But for the meantime, tonight we are going to be doing the next part in the Outlast story. So you may remember the last time I was streaming, we did regular Outlast. Didn't do anything special as far as nightmare mode. We did at least kind of start with it, but it was quickly apparent that my how do I put this? My technical limitations when running this game and streaming lead me to some rather unfortunate circumstances in which maybe I will not be surviving otherwise survivable encounters. So rather than seeing me scream at the computer for the entire duration, we'll do hard mode, but we won't do nightmare. So we actually wound up doing all of Outlast in one sitting, and I thought I'd maybe do a follow-up this time around. Actually, just before we jump into the game, I do want to take a minute and make sure that I do have mature filter on, because this game is probably not the sort of thing the kids should be watching. And once I get that set up, we'll be able to jump in. So my expectation actually is to get through the entirety of Whistleblower tonight. I hope you get a chance, or I hope you enjoy it if you haven't seen it before. I think it's a very worthy follow-up to the original game. In fact, in some senses, I would argue it's a little bit better. In other ways, there's maybe a couple of things about it that weren't as strong. But overall, I mean, I think I really like these games more, especially the more that I've played them. I've done 2 full run-throughs, and then I kind of just jump in and get as far as I can over a period of time every once in a while. And they really hold up. I was kind of the opinion that maybe some of the jumps in that would lose their intensity, and they certainly do. But there's actually enough inside of that. There's enough inside of the game on its own to actually sustain repeat playthroughs, which is maybe something I wasn't expecting originally, but I really like about the games. So in any case, if it's the first time that you've seen this game, then I hope you enjoy it. If you don't want any revelations as to the outcomes of the first Outlast game, it is the prequel to it, but it also ends after the events of the the original game, the base game. So basically, I think sometimes people get a little bit overzealous regarding spoilers, but with that in mind, if you are not inclined to have a game like this spoiled, do keep in mind that there is going to be a little bit of plot revealed from the base game. As far as the rest of it goes, let me just take a quick second here. All right. But yeah, so with that in mind, if you have seen Whistleblower before, welcome to the stream. I don't know if Outlast quite has the fan base enough to bring new people in. I will admit I am probably a very boring Outlast caster. I sort of know that I can't do the funny reactions and I can't do the shocked reactions. Obviously, I don't have a cam. So if you want to see somebody getting terrified, I'm not entirely sure I can do this particularly well. But like I said, I do think these games hold up, and there seemed to be at least some interest in the discussion sort of surrounding the game when I originally did this. So with that in mind, we'll do... And sorry, it was Insane Mode that we didn't do, but we will do Nightmare. We will jump into the second and concluding chapter of the Outlast story. I also know this isn't my usual time. Actually, I took a look out. So first of all, obviously, everybody's playing Fallout 4 right now. It looks interesting. I've never actually played any of the Fallout games. I do have them, but they have a tendency of crashing on the PC that I have. And a lot of my favorite streamers are actually streaming right now, so I'm not quite sure how many people we'll have in today, but if you're here hanging out, thanks for stopping by. If you're new, or even if you've been here for a while, feel free to say hi. I'll try and stay quiet during some of the plotty sort of stuff.
Open those eyes. You don't have to wake up, but open your eyes.
What's the matter? Somebody hit you? Here. Let me help.
Andrew, you getting these alerts?
Kind of busy here.
It sounds like real trouble. At the engine, they said Hope made a lateral ascension.
What do we hope? They're not happy about it?
No.
Shit. Shit. Come on.
Right, so, I mean, right at the very beginning of the game, you've got sort of a little bit of an indication in terms of plot events before you know who Billy Hope is if you've played the original game inside of here, so... but it's sometimes easy to miss over some of these titles here, so... You don't know me, you have to make this quick, there might be monitoring. I did 2 weeks of software consult at Murkoff Psychiatric Systems Facilities in Mount Massive. I can't read it anymore. But this is... you know, if you haven't known anything about the DLC... originally starting in this game, this email should be familiar. It's the email that the protagonist of the base game, Miles Upshur, receives from a software consultant in Mount Massive. Okay, all sorts of NDAs I'm very much breaking right now, but seriously, fuck those guys. Terrible things happening here. Don't understand it. Don't believe half the things I saw. Doctors talking about dream therapy going too deep. Finding something that had been waiting for them in the mountain. People are being hurt and Murkoff is making money. It needs to be exposed. So in terms of the type of person that you're playing, in the case of Miles Upshur, you're an individual, you're a journalist who's going and specifically is seeking out these businesses that are well, I mean, basically any kind of corrupt practice, but clearly nobody's going to have any particular sympathy to evil corporations that are doing bad things. So with that in mind, you've got Miles Upshur, who's sort of the investigative reporter, the guy who's trying to nail a company like Murkoff. In this one, as the title indicates, you're playing the whistleblower. You're playing, it's Wayland Park, I believe, is the guy's name. Software consultant, working at Mount Massive, seen too much, and needs to let somebody know. And so our first choice of the game is to send an email.
They've paged for you 3 times already. There's something urgent at the engine. What are you doing in here anyway? I thought you were just a software.
So a few things that I sort of like about this opening, which is number one, I mean, you already have the... You have a few things sort of starting you off with it. You have kind of the nervousness. They use all the same sound effects when you're sending the email, which is obviously a fairly dangerous one. I'll talk about this after this scene's done.
We got a
patient 30 seconds out and we're blind inside his head.
Call into the chamber, ask them to delay.
No, I don't need another performance evaluation. Mr. Park here is going to have us up and running before we even know it. Right, Mr. Park? Are we happy, Mr. Park?
Steve? fMRI is still dark.
You're doubting our friend, Mr. Wayland Park? Which I consider more than unkind to his programming skill and considerable dedication to the Murkoff Corporation. Fuck me, they're bringing him in.
No! No, not again! No, no! Jack, Fox, I know you can do it! Help! Help me! Help me, they got Ray! Ray! Help me! Don't let them do this! Don't let them... You! I know you can stop this! You have to help me! You have
Hey, calm yourself. This is a high security...
It's all right, Agent. Mr. Park was just surprised. I'm sure he's still calm and eager to finish his work. Get your seat. Quickly, Mr. Park. Head will need to roll if the fusion monitoring is not active when we put him in the engine. 5 seconds. 4. 3.
Arterial spin labeling is back online.
Good.
Positioning imaging plate.
You're finished, Mr. Wayland Park. You can leave. Don't expect anything but honesty in my review of your performance.
This is a few little touches in this game. So we were talking a little bit about the security camera in here. Again, I'm never sure if these are intentional or not, but the fact that the camera just turns on you when you walk up to it is always a nice little touch, and it seems to be recurring throughout the Outlast game inside here. So both the first one and the game here. It's going to be a little choppy for a while, unfortunately. I believe in the cutscene that's about, well, not quite cutscene, but the scenario that's about to come up, I always notice the audio gets desynced. So I'll just take a quick minute here and hang out for a little bit and talk about sort of the opening of this and what I really like. So first thing to keep in mind is maybe how far first-person games have come. You know, once upon a time you have games like Doom, you have Wolfenstein. They start you off with a gun. You're running through this maze, picking up resources, picking up key cards to be able to make progress. But basically, it's a game in which your skill is tested against the environment. And then along comes a game like Half-Life. Half-Life doesn't start you off with a weapon. In fact, Half-Life starts you off with just an ordinary day at work. And all of a sudden, it's a little bit of a different way of breathing life into what seemed to be a genre which kind of had everything that needed to be, everything that could have been said about it, right? And so, you know, this is hardly a shooter. This is very clearly a different kind of game, but it's sort of neat to just sort of see this setup to say, you know, maybe originally when games like Quake were being released, you know, if somebody said to you, it's like, okay, well, I want to start off a day, or so I want to start off a game as a day at work, everyone would say, well, that would be boring. To see that we can actually come back, we can make a game like this and actually start you off with your job. And there's a few features about this which I sort of like. So first of all, you're sending off this this obviously very important email in terms of the plot and in terms of just the overall story arc. But of course, all of your nervousness, the same breathing sound effects, you sort of see the leg bouncing and all of that. You know, you already sort of have this this little nervous sense inside of the game. I can't necessarily say that I feel particularly stressed during it, but it does a nice little it does this nice little effect at the beginning of setting up context. Obviously, that's not the first thing that you see in the game. The first thing you see in the game is your capture and being strapped into the chair. And hey, T. Clark, how's it going? One of the great things about it, too, is that when you have a game like this, so in contrast to a game like Amnesia, which has sort of a custom-designed engine, this is using Unreal, which is capable of quite very impressive graphic fidelity. And you have that creepy doctor looking straight at you in nice detail. I mean, the graphic settings on this are medium, so when Eddie Gluskin comes running up and starts banging on the wall, that maybe doesn't look as convincing, and you can sort of see a seam in the wall right here. So these are, I'm not showing the game in its best form, But in this case here, you have this maybe a little bit more believable and interesting to look at world. And so as a result, I think, I don't necessarily think things need to look real to be, maybe fear-inducing or to create a sense of tension. But I think in this game, it helps it right away. And though, the work that they put into those models is apparent right from the very start of the game. They have this big close-up, well-rendered face in front of you doing nasty things to you. So in terms of the setup too, you have this very unfriendly atmosphere created to you. So, obviously a company that's very concerned about order. You've got somebody looking for you in the hardware room. Why weren't you answering the page? So on and so forth. Very similar opening to Half-Life. And then you run in, and just the dialogue, every little, all of the little touches actually quite matter, in my opinion here. So, for instance, you have the control guy being called Steve by his coworker, and yet not only does he call you Mr. Park constantly, but, it's always this sort of sarcastic, mean-spirited use of your name. You're doubting our friend Mr. Wayland Park. Just this very clear idea of we know exactly who you are, and we're monitoring you. And whether or not it's for your performance review, as is suggested in here, or what's about to come up, again, it's definitely just an oppressive environment for you. And again, it just sort of sets up this the sense of nastiness right from the start. So even though this is, you'd almost say, sort of just a little bit of fluff that you can put into the beginning, all of the ideas, everything that you need for this setup is given to you in these opening moments. And now we meet
Telling stories outside of class.
the suit.
On the floor! Down! Hands where I can see him! Mr. Wayland Park. Consulting contract 8208. Software engineer with a level 3 security clearance. Graduated cum laude from Berkley, but still somehow not smart enough to realize that the last thing a fly ought to do in a spider's web is wiggle. Somehow dumb enough to think that a borrowed laptop, onion router, and firewall patch would be enough to fool the world's leading supplier of biometric security. Stupid, Mr. Park. More than stupid. In fact, that was crazy. I'm afraid we're going to have you committed. Mr. Park, will you willingly submit to forced confinement? Did you hear that, Agent?
He said yes, Mr. Blair.
Great. Oh, and did I just hear Mr. Wayland Park volunteer for the morphogenic engine program?
Well, that's what I heard, Mr. Blair.
That was brave indeed, Wayland. The Murkoff Corporation and the onward march of science both appreciate your bravery and sacrifice. Maybe you could administer Mr. Park here a light anesthetic.
Gladly.
So again, everything that you need. You can notice that Jeremy Blair, in this case, it sort of seems like the entire Murkoff Corporation has this really unfriendly way of talking to you, constantly calling you Mr. Wayland Park, Mr. Park, a consulting contract. What is it, 8203 or something like that? I especially like the idea of Blair mentioning your consulting contract, just this idea that they know everything. And for those of you who have not seen the original game, this is the morphogenic engine therapy in glorious 2 frames a second, which is good, so you won't go mad. Although I'll go mad from the latency issues. Now this part I'm not entirely clear on, how the bonds get undone. I mean, we can say it's the wall rider, except for the fact that... There it is. I fucked up. Oh god, where am I? Hours could have passed, or weeks. Brain filled with static. They made me watch the engine. Have to get help. Have to call for help. Lisa, I'm sorry. If I die, I know you'll find me. I know you won't rest until you find my body. I hope you find this camera with my corpse. I hope the evidence on it does what I couldn't, exposes the truth. Lisa, baby, I'm so sorry. I fucked up. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I fucked up bad. So, you want your car to have a morphogenic engine? By the way, T. Clark, I know I started off the stream talking about this, but I am sorry that I have not been more regular in my casts. Grad school is definitely kicking my ass, and I've just not been able to come up with a proper balance for it. So I had some time tonight, and we will be doing some Outlast instead. We will get back to stuff like we'll be doing Crusader Kings. We'll be doing the sort of regular stuff when I find time for it. And if I can't do a regular Friday Crusader Kings, I will find another way of getting that set up. But because this was a weekday stream, I wanted to maybe catch up on my promise to play Whistleblower. So again, we have you could do this game. It's a DLC to an existing game, which the video camera had been a major component for the for the entire point. In fact, losing the camera is a bit of a set piece in the original game. So nobody would have questioned you just having a camera at the start of this one, but they do actually motivate it here. So you're Waylon, you failed to, or as far as you're concerned, the journalist never got your email. They caught you. So as far as you're concerned, your email never got out, and now you're captured. So in this case, you document as far as you can. You also see a very, very different kind of personality. So if you look at Miles's notes, and we talked a little bit at the end of the Outlast stream in terms of the different ways that they've portrayed the character in terms of their actions, but even in terms of the text, you notice that Miles, even though he will talk about being trapped in Mount Massive Asylum or things like that, it is always a very defiant tone, and it's actually usually a very aggressive tone. Whereas Waylon, you'll notice here, is quite a bit more passive. I won't necessarily say that whistleblowing is maybe a less bold act, because it actually takes a lot. If you can imagine being that person in Enron who says what's going wrong, or to be any of these sorts of people who've actually stood up to a culture without any indication that there would be a reward, or that even their message would get out there, because certainly there are very powerful and influential people who don't necessarily want to have that story come out. And that could be politics, that could be the corporate world. So in this case, you've got a story like Enron, which becomes very, very large. And so as a result, the whistleblowers maybe get some attention, but maybe consider in contrast some of the individuals who had wanted to testify or come up in terms of the Clinton, the Lewinsky scandal. Now, independent of whether or not you think it was right for that to have become an issue, what is interesting to look at is the treatment of people who wanted to testify. Because, and again, this isn't necessarily to lay something in the Clintons or to take a particular stand on that issue on there. But this is maybe one where, think about this, the public opinion on that sort of went to the point is like, what a big waste of time that was. Did we really need to make such a big deal about a blowjob? And I think people are saying, well, it's maybe not, that isn't quite what, why people were getting so up in arms about it. It's a little bit before my time to speak from the actual events, but it did, sort of read after the fact some of the events surrounding it. And they were a little bit more spicier, right? So, the thing that gets the news is the affair. But in terms of other kinds of practices, ones that are maybe a little bit more tied towards shady dealings, as we sort of take for granted in Washington, those are maybe a little bit less reported. And so the important thing here is that whether or not the accusers were correct or whether they right or wrong, we'll never know. We don't know their names, basically. Nobody could really bring it off the top of their head. And yet they underwent quite a bit of intimidation. So when you're a whistleblower like that, you never... if I were in a position like that, I would never know if I was going to be one of those people who was reviled, loses their job, and, some public smear campaign turns me into sort of this opportunist You know, you could sort of see a figure like maybe Bradley Manning, who kind of gets turned into this caricature as like, oh, he was really messed up because he wanted to become a woman, and so that's why he leaked all of these national security secrets. You know, that is certainly one story, and it's one that I don't think is particularly credible. Of course, you know, there's now Chelsea Manning. I think most people choose not to adopt that view. Yeah, thanks for that, T. Clark. I mean, again, I want to be on top of streaming where I can, but you know, I'll do what I can. And yeah, sorry, I turned this into a little bit of a monologue, but we've got a small viewership right now, so it'll give me a chance to talk about these things. Anyways, it wasn't my intention to go off on whistleblowers for a while, but basically the big thing here is that you don't know if you're going to be, you know, the quote unquote hero, or if you're just going to have the maximum personal cost to you with ultimately no impact. But with that in mind, Waylon Park comes off as quite a bit more of a timid individual. In this case, you know, he knows that he's gone up against something big, and that he's probably not going to make it out. And so again, it motivates his decision to take the camera with him. You know, it makes sense within the context of the environment that he's in. They are doing experiments, makes sense to videotape them. And so the camera trope finds its way back into the game. There was another thing that I was going to say about Waylon and these opening scenes. I don't know. Well, let's just keep playing the game. Another example is The Insider, that Russell Crowe movie based on the story of a whistleblower in the tobacco industry. That is a fantastic example, actually. It's one of Russell Crowe's better movies, too. Oh, right. I was going to talk about... Oh. I'll wait till he's done talking.
I'll open you up. Open you up and show you. You wait right there.
So there's the question of how we communicate sort of that mental damage from the morphogenic engine, and I think burning in the image is a great way of doing that. Oh my god, we've got a Fraggle Dragon raid right when the Wall Rider's going to show up. Alright guys, I'm going to get into a horrible scene and I'll give you a proper greeting in a minute. My god. Alright guys, thank you so much. That is a very healthy raid coming in there. Let me just take a minute and I will greet you all one by one. We are going to be playing Outlast Whistleblower tonight. So if you've not played the original Outlast game, there are going to be some plot points.
Come to join our therapy session. Here, take the blade. Dig around in our friend here. Get a little red on your hands. It's always healthy to express yourself. You keep it bottled up too long and you might do something you regret. No. You're one of those. Too good for the likes of us. Think you're different? Something special? There are no observers here. Now, get the fuck out of here before I change my mind.
Actually, we will follow this terrible man's advice, and we've got a bit of a breaking point coming up, and I'll greet you then.
Try to go. Come back here.
Oh my god, the lag. Oh my god, we've got so many follows coming here as well. Alright, we're in a safe spot, so let's just...
I would never want to belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member. Bad idea. We'll get out of here through reception.
Alright, guys. Welcome, Raiders. Alright, so we've got Tony Loran, Torrigen, Chumley, Wounded Pop-Tart, Maida Hiker, Ewok Beer, Mateo 328381, We've got Wounded Pop-Tart again, Ewok Beard, Darth Gazir,
Yeah, I noticed. We need to get to that radio.
and JP Chivalry. And I think that's everyone. And now I'm being told to tie up, be tied up, have my nipples tweaked. Spam follows to Dragon's Rule. This isn't Fallout 4. You're right, this isn't Fallout 4. I have not actually... I've not really played any of the Fallout games, so... Alright, I also got a bunch of follows here, so thank you very much, everybody, for those follows. This is actually my first stream in a really long time, so I really appreciate that. Mateo, JP Chivalry, Wounded Pop-Tart, Darth Gazir, and Ewok Beer. What a great welcome back to Twitch. Thanks a lot, guys. Tony Loran obviously requires no introduction. Game developer, wonderful streamer, somebody who deals with my harassment. In fact, I actually really don't treat any other streamers quite the way that I treat Tony Loran, and she's an absolutely wonderful personality for dealing with me. Like I said, you guys already know her stream. I've got T. Clark in here, who's a fantastic viewer of my own. I think you've seen Tony already, but if you haven't, this is actually a way that you can hang out with me when I'm not streaming. And there's also, there's definitely more than just T. Clark inside here. We do have a few lurkers in the channel as well. So for those of you who are not familiar with Tony Loran, she's got a wonderful stream. She actually has worked on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which I actually saw she was playing earlier tonight. So if you want a great perspective on what it's actually like to make a game, and both the good and the bad, so the idea of, you know, what went well, what am I proud of, but also here's something that people complain about, but maybe they don't appreciate, you know, why. You've got that element as well. Who did I just miss on the file? Was that My Day Hiker? Thank you for the follows, guys. I'm really sorry if I miss you. I'll try and keep an eye on the Twitch alerts to see what's going on, but I obviously just got waylaid and I need to catch up with everything that's going on here. So fantastic. Thanks a lot, guys. So promise me not Fallout 4. Let's roll out Fraggle Dragons. Oh boy. Regified geezer. All right. Well, I am Canadian, so there we go. Tony Rand came to support me for some really odd reasons. Absolutely true. Yeah, well, Chumley, you don't need any introduction. Chumley is one of Tony Rand's mods, and actually somebody who hangs out in a lot of streams that I do. This could possibly be the Team Panda connection. I'm going to assume that, because it is certainly not my green eyes and mysterious sexual charisma that has him stopping by. But definitely appreciate you coming along as well, Chumley. I was going to say, gets no introduction or requires no introduction. I did say hi in the original one. Watch him troll Tony. Yeah, that's true. So let me just take a minute here and say, so I'll tell you guys a little bit about my Outlast streams. I do not do horror particularly well. It seems that there are two fun horror streams that people do. One are the ones where people are just freaking out and screaming and, you know, putting on kabuki theater. I can't do that. I'm a very tame and reserved individual. And then, of course, the other one would be if people do funny, and I'm not a funny person. I'm an economist. So in that sense, I do boring horror streams. But I actually really like these Outlast games. It's kind of funny because when W. Shand shouted me out on his stream, he said, you know, what are you playing, System Shock? Outlast! You know, this is not the sort of thing that people normally associate with me. But I actually think these are really well-made games, and so one of the things that I like doing is talking about them. And so as for some of you who watch Tony from a game design perspective, I have no expertise in the industry, likely never will. But I think, you know, with that in mind, from players' perspective, there can be something that's contributed, maybe something interesting in terms of sort of my reading of the game and the things that I thought made it work for me, because this will be my second time playing it through, actually third time playing it through. And I think the game still holds up, even though it doesn't necessarily have any jump scares to surprise me. So, T. Clark is not here. I'm totally imagining him. All right, guys. So, there's a radio in the prison, shortwave. It's electronic, I can make it talk, make it work for me. There's hope, Lisa. I'm coming home to you. My mistake was subtlety, like you always said. I thought leaking information to a few journalists was the safer way. I didn't want the spotlight, the attention. Murkoff is dangerous, I know that. I thought I had to be subtle for your sake, Lisa, for the boys. But I should have exposed what Murkoff is doing to the world. I should have shouted to anyone and everyone. I can't die. Not before I reach the radio. They can't cover this up now. It's too broken. Too dangerous. From a French accent, you probably guess we're from Canada. I actually have more French friends from Paris, or well, France. A few of them are Parisians, than French Canadian friends now. Interestingly enough. So again, we were talking earlier on how Wayland Park is actually a very different character from the main character in the original Outlast. He's quite a bit more timid. He's definitely a lot more self-reflective. Maybe that sort of suits the computer scientist versus the journalist temperament, although I think that's maybe one stereotype too far. But the other feature, which we should see in a moment, there's actually a really well-crafted little moment coming up in a minute that I'll talk about first. So, pushing it over. This guy is totally harmless, but he makes you crap yourself as soon as he just comes out of the shadows like that. So if you look at the way that he opens and closes doors, Miles will always slam them. You notice here, I didn't put my hand on it to sort of soften it because I was carrying the video camera, but Wayland opens and closes doors much more timidly. And again, that's just another way that they've been able to communicate character through sort of their behaviors.
You're not security. I'm a patient like you. Stole these clothes from a dead body I found. You gotta get me out of here. Please, just push the button. Open the door. We can get out of here together. Stop! No! No! Stop! 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 Raya! Stop! Stop! Stop!
It's definitely out of character for me to do something like that. I'm not entirely sure a character like Wayland would just kind of stand there and videotape a guy being killed. But I'd never seen a man die before today. Never seen a dead body outside of a coffin. Dozens today, murdered and worse. I looked into one man's eyes as another tore him to pieces. Claimed he was a doctor, and then saw the rags that they dressed me in, and he changed his story. Said he was a patient. Could have been either. They're all crazy, all sick. No real difference between them now. The therapy is spreading. And what am I? I watched this man die and only thought, it's not me, thank God. I know I'll die someday. I don't want to be murdered. So again, we communicate character both through the notes and through the actions inside of the game in terms of the way that I'm opening and closing doors. Which is good. I mean, again, from a design perspective, you could argue that there is no... I'm not going to say to myself, oh, well, Outlast wasn't very good because, I'll just give you an example of how he closes doors like that. Very different from the way that Miles opens and closes the doors. And I'm making a really big deal about this, right? If they didn't have it in this game, I would have never sat down and said, oh, God, what a crappy game. Run for your life, boyo! Some of that famous lag that killed me last time around. So, again, it's something that I probably could have seen I could have gone through the game and either not noticed or they wouldn't have included, and I never would have said whistleblowers suck because it didn't include these. But this is a really good example of how Red Barrel's, Canadian company by the way, and this is made with Canadian government money through the CMF, Canadian Media Fund, which I think is a wonderful program, which allows people to maybe take a little bit of a chance on some games. Another good example of a game that's come through this program would be Guacamelee and maybe Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery, which was an iPad game, I believe. But Canadians are surprisingly good at game development, it turns out. But let's just take a minute here and we'll talk a little bit about that scenario. I know I was talking over the dialogue on that, but you need to remember, you need to look down at yourself to remember that you're dressed as an inmate. But you see one of these doctors terrified, running away, and, you lock the door. Well, why do you have a locked door? One, because the game is boring if you're just able to walk out of the building and escape. Right? But number two, of course, is that you've just set up this scenario where doctors are being murdered by the patients. And actually, there's very little distinction being made between doctors and patients. As you can see here, most of the bodies here are not necessarily doctors. So these busy screaming, it's one of them coming for us. And so again, here you have, you can sort of see Red Barrel's priorities are definitely along the lines of making a credible world, as you can sort of see through the care that goes into the modeling, into the design, but also having people behave in what you would consider to be somewhat reasonable ways. And I mean, this is a game which has like cannibals and, and ghosts running around and things like that, right? So in some senses, you're dealing with the fantastic, you're dealing with the paranormal. So you can't have, full credibility. But I do think some of the ways that they're successful in creating horror in this title is by, where they can, motivating people's behaviors in somewhat believable ways, right? So you find yourself abandoned, not because, all the Murkoff scientists are awful people. That's probably true as well. But then in this case here, legitimately because you have been dressed as a patient. And as far as they're concerned, you're just another crazy person. It's just little touches like that, to me, again, the more believable the environment. Did I just lose audio? I think I did. Actually, I'm going to save an exit for this one, guys, because I actually think the sound will sell the character who's coming up. So
I would never want to belong to any
KNA 5041, thank you very much for following. I actually know you are a game designer yourself, so I apologize if I am completely making this up as I go along. I am trying to be somewhat, serious and credible so far as I can say. But I also need to appreciate, especially when I've got professionals in the stream, I'm probably going to be causing more than a few face palms. But speaking of face palms, I need to figure out why I lost audio, and we get to see the spinning ball of death for a little while. So sorry about that, guys. I can see we've had a very big drop off from Tony's stream. So I will just say for a minute, guys, for those of you who are still hanging around with Tony's stream, and either if Outlast isn't your thing or my style isn't quite your thing, completely understand. Definitely appreciate you hanging out and giving me that support. I don't think I've ever quite had as many follows on one stream. It's been a very long time since we've had follows like that. So I really appreciate you guys stopping by and showing that support. I intend to be doing all of Whistleblower tonight. So if you like this game or you want to see what's going on, I'm definitely happy to show that to you. We just need to get past this little hurdle right now. I think I'm actually going to force quit. And then we'll be back to business. Having played this before, I have played it before, KNA 5041. I've actually, this will probably be the third time that I've completed the game. But I find that it holds up. I was surprised. My original description to people was that I actually I preferred Amnesia's setting. I thought it was a more unsettling environment, and that I thought Outlast was a better looking, and an interesting game, maybe a better ending than Amnesia. But I wasn't quite sold on it being the better one, but I actually noticed that I found Outlast to be quite a bit more replayable than... Actually, as is indicated, this is definitely not a 24-hour long game. And yet, for some reason, this is probably a bit of idling going on here. Oh, you know what? This is probably not going to let me play until I close Steam. You know what, guys? Just for expediency, I'm going to turn off the stream for a very brief second. That's just so that I can get the update done here. This is just trying to upload something to Steam Cloud. And I know my bandwidth isn't enough to get that done quickly. So I'm going to turn off the stream for a very brief moment. I will be back more or less